Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am coming at you with my first quarter favorites. This list is more than just my favorite books, though don't worry, there will be that as well. But I like to talk about all kinds of things in my favorites video. I started doing this last year and it's just fun. I'm sharing about more than just books. I'm sharing about music I've been listening to, shows or movies that I've been watching, video games I've been playing, food I've been enjoying, all that kind of stuff. And there will be timestamps linked in the description below. So that way, if you're not interested in a particular thing, you could just skip around. You can skip straight to the books, which will be at the end of this video, if that's the main thing that you want to see. I'll also try to have links for not just the books that I'm talking about, but also I'll be talking about some recipes and some other things, and I'll try to have links for all of that below so that way you can find some of the things that I'm talking about. So speaking of recipes, let's start there. Let's start talking about some of the food that I have been making. I'm just going to talk about some newer recipes that I've discovered that have just been glorious. These are recipes that I have made multiple times. And for me, I am a person that I don't do that. I will have a recipe, and if I like it a lot, and all of us like it a lot, I will maybe make it once a month. And these are ones that I have made in succession, really close together. So that means I really, really, really loved them. So the first recipe is one that I can thank my friend Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space for recommending this to me. And that is lemon artichoke chicken and rice from Budget Bites. So this is a super simple one pot meal from Budget Bites where basically you're cooking some chicken and then you put some artichoke and some lemon juice and some rice in there, and then you just like let it all cook in one pot. So it's super simple. It doesn't have a lot of ingredients and it's really easy to make. And so there were multiple facets to that I loved, but oh my goodness, I love this so much. I made it like twice within 2 weeks. The second time I made it, I did alter it just a little bit because Claire found out she really doesn't like artichokes. So I halved the amount of artichokes and then put a bunch of baby spinach in there instead. And she actually liked that quite a bit better. It also recommends topping the recipe with feta, but I am dairy free, so I don't buy very much dairy in my house, but I can have goat's milk. I just can't have anything cow related. So Aldi has some goat cheese feta that's super good. There's like a tomato basil one, and I bought that one to put on it, and Claire and I really love that. Claire's favorite part of the whole meal is basically just the goat cheese. Speaking of super easy and super simple, another recipe that I've really enjoyed is this slow cooker spaghetti sauce recipe from Damn Delicious. And my word, it's so easy and so yummy. I love it. And we are only a family of 3. So for me, when I make it, we end up eating a bunch of it, and then I'll freeze half of it. So we'll have some leftovers in the fridge, but then I'll have half of it frozen. So then I can heat it up on a night when I don't feel like cooking. And there you go. Voila. Dinner. So easy. I've made this for several of Claire's friends that have come over as well, because I'm like, what kid doesn't like spaghetti? Most kids do. So I usually make my homemade garlic bread with it, which I don't have a recipe for because I just kind of make it up myself, but I make it with that. And so far, literally everyone I've served it to has loved it, and it's super fast and easy. And the last recipe that I want to talk about is a Vietnamese chicken curry, which I didn't even know there was Vietnamese curry. I knew about Thai curry. I knew about Indian curry. I've recently discovered that there's a Korean curry, which I have not found a recipe for that yet. I need to, but I didn't know that there were so many other like Asian variations of curry, because I usually think of Indian curry and then secondly Thai curry. So the Vietnamese curry recipe that I use is from Beyond Kimchi, and that is actually a Korean food blogger. And she makes lots of other stuff too, obviously, as this is Vietnamese. I did fudge some of the ingredients just because they weren't readily available to me. So I'm sure that that makes the meal less authentic, but it was so delicious. And all of us just absolutely loved it so much. They recommend what you can do for serving is that you can either serve it with a baguette or you can serve it over rice noodles. And I served it over rice noodles, and like My mouth is watering thinking about it. It's just so, so good. Since this is for the first quarter of the year, some other things that I've kind of been doing in my morning routine is just enjoying a cozy atmosphere because it's so dark when you get up in the winter. And so for a while I was doing some ambient rooms and really enjoying those. And I left my Christmas tree set up for all of January. And so I had the twinkle lights on my Christmas tree and I was playing ambient rooms on my TV. And I'll link a couple of my favorites down below in case you're interested in watching any of those. But that's what I was doing. And then once I took the Christmas tree down, I was just kind of like, oh, now what do I do? So I actually ended up setting up a cozy reading corner in my home library, which is wonderful because I wasn't really using it that much. I mean, obviously I was using it because books, but I wasn't actually sitting in my comfy chair, which I'm sitting in now, or really enjoying it. And now I do that every single morning. So I found a reading playlist on Spotify that is just so relaxing and so lovely. So I'll link that so that way you can find it because it has been marvelous for the mornings. And then also I have a candle that I picked up at Aldi like a while ago and I forgot that I even had it. So I was lighting candles in the morning, but then I found one that's one of those Timberwick candles. So it actually like crackles and makes sounds like a fireplace. And it is just so lovely. So most mornings still, even though it's not as dark out now in the morning as it was, most mornings still, I'm still lighting the candle and putting on my reading playlist and kind of doing my quiet time like that. And then usually getting some more reading done while I'm drinking my coffee before I start my day. And speaking of music, I'll just seg into music that I've been enjoying. So besides the reading playlist, which I just mentioned, I do have like one new to me anyway, Christian song that I have been loving. And I think the version that I listen to is the Worship Initiative, which is put out by Shane and Shane. And I think it's actually one of their wives that's singing this song. And it's called Yet Not I, But Through Christ in Me. And it is beautiful. Like, it's basically a modern hymn. I love like the way that it's structured like a hymn. And it's just really beautiful. So highly recommend that. And of course, we have been listening to K-pop because we're always listening to K-pop. I think in our home lately, the K-pop band that is listened to the most is not BTS anymore, which is funny because I'm wearing my BTS shirt right now. But BTS is not the most commonly listened to K-pop group in our home anymore. That has been taken over hardcore by Twice. Like, Twice is for sure Claire's favorite K-pop group right now, and they just recently released a new mini album and she loves a lot of the songs on that. I think my favorite song on it is Set Me Free. I love it so much. And then she's also been teaching herself the choreography for Can't Stop Me, which is super cute. It's fun to watch her try to learn choreography because I was always making up dance moves to songs when I was little and having dance parties, and so it's fun that she does dance parties all the time now. And then we have discovered Enhypen, and we really like Enhypen. And my favorite Enhypen songs are Polaroid Love, and then Go Big or Go Home is like a hype song for me. Like when I'm struggling and feeling overwhelmed with so much I need to get done, like I will listen to Go Big or Go Home on a loop and be like, I can do this. I got this. This is fine. So highly recommend that one. That one's super fun. Okay, moving on to TV shows, but also still Korean. So it's a nice little seg. So I finished 2 K-dramas in the first quarter of the year. Actually, the first one, I may have finished 4th quarter, but I did not make a 4th quarter of last year favorites. Just didn't get around to it. So that one is Tale of the Nine-Tailed. And I watched this with my K-drama buddy, Christy. And just everything buddy Christy. This is one she had watched, I think, multiple times, and it is really interesting. It's her favorite K-drama, the first one that she ever watched, and it took her a really long time to find anything that she liked even remotely close to as much. And I can see why, because it's very different than most K-dramas I have watched. So basically, there is folklore within Korea about these nine-tailed foxes who are kind of like ancient beings. I don't think that they're necessarily immortal. but maybe they are unless they're actually killed. And so the drama really follows these nine-tailed foxes who don't look like foxes. By the way, they look like humans, but they're able to kind of like transform into things like that. And then there's another girl who is also a huge part of the drama who is not a nine-tailed fox, but her parents went missing when she was really young. And so she has become part of this investigative thing where she's trying to come to the bottom and try to figure out what is going on with her parents, like where are they, what's going on with them. But she investigates a lot of supernatural things, which would include nine-tailed foxes. And so it was really, really good. There was a lot of good relationship stuff, and there was a lot of good just like drama and excitement, action-packed. I will warn you that this show kind of like transcends genres in a way, but it does, some of the episodes have kind of, I would say, a relatively strong, for me anyway, a horror element to them. And I think that the only reason why I still enjoyed it, because I'm not a big horror person, it's because it relied so heavily on Korean mythology. And so that is why it was really interesting to me, is that those elements were tied in. Otherwise, I think I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it. But it was so fascinating to me. I love the mythology and folklore of other cultures. And so it was a very strong component in this. I won't say that the whole thing was horror, because it really wasn't, but there were some episodes where I felt like it was really, really intense. So that one was one that I really loved. I also rewatched Startup, which was my very first K-drama ever. And I watched it with Christy and Joanna, and my husband and I were looking for a new K-drama, and I just was so convinced that he would love Startup. And so I talked him into watching it, and he did. He loved it so much. And we used to, sometimes we would watch 2 episodes at a time, because the episodes are around an hour each. And with Startup, he could not bring himself to do that, because he's like, but it's gonna end sooner. But it's really, really good. I've talked about it on my channel before, but it was probably a year ago or something, because it was first quarter of last year that I watched it. So if you have not heard of Startup, it's essentially about this place where people can have startups, like entrepreneurs can come in and start their companies, and they can come in with their ideas, and they can pair with developers. And as they're starting their company, they're at this location called the Sandbox. And Sandbox, basically you have a mentor who's working through these things with you, and it's kind of a safe place to work on these things. You don't have to worry about overhead. They're paying for all your rent, they're paying salaries, they're doing all that kind of stuff. So you can really just focus on growing your business and being successful. But they are extremely picky about who they let in, because they have a limited number of spaces. So we have some people who are coming from different areas, different walks of life, who want to get into Sandbox, so that way they're able to, work on their company and succeed. And so that's kind of the general premise, but there's so many other things going on. There's so many relationships, there's so many twists, there's so many subplots, but yet they all work together in perfect harmony. And I felt like they were all concluded in a perfect way. High praise from my husband is that he has not been able to find a drama that he's loved nearly as much as Masang, which is the first one that we started with together. And he just hasn't been able to find anything that's topped it. And he told me that if he had watched Startup first, Startup would have been his favorite, but it can't pass up Masang for him in his mind, just because Masang was like the first drama he ever watched. So he kind of has that pedestal in his mind because of that, which I get, because Startup was my favorite and my very first one that I ever watched. And I've never watched one that has quite touched it. Although I will say that Tale of the Nine-Tailed actually came close. So those are the 2 K-dramas that I finished. I haven't really been watching anything else, actually, because I've been playing a lot of video games. So that's the next thing that I'm going to talk about. I finished 3 video games in the first quarter of the year, and I have found my niche. I have found the kind of games that I love. So Breath of the Wild helped me to see that the games that I am drawn into and love so much have a strong exploring component to it, preferably open world, but it doesn't have to be open world. It just has to be very exploratory and a strong puzzle solving component. So when those two elements are there, it's a game that I'm probably going to love. And so the games that I completed all fell into that category. So I actually played 2 Paper Mario games. So I replayed the original because if you have a certain Switch membership, then you are actually able to access a whole bunch of Nintendo 64 games. So I played the original Paper Mario, which I played as a kid, and I think I played it as a teenager and possibly as a young adult as well. I'm not really sure, but I had played it multiple times before. So I replayed that with Claire, and that was super fun. And I also played the newest Paper Mario, which is called Origami King, and that one actually came out for the Switch. I loved Origami King, but not at first. I actually tried it last year when my daughter got it for her birthday and didn't like it because the battling system is super wonky in my opinion, because there's a puzzle solving component to the battles and it's timed. So I just did not enjoy that element at all. But as the game went on, that element actually got a lot easier. Even though it got more complicated, but it got easier because you found things that could extend your time and also you just got more used to it. It was just like, oh, okay, like, you know, your brain started working in that fashion a little bit more, but it took me a while to get into that element of the game and I really wasn't enjoying the battle component, and also it's not the same as the original Paper Mario or like Thousand Year Door or any of the other Paper Marios that you actually are like upgrading in these battles. You do not do that in these battles. So that element was different as well, but it was so tongue-in-cheek and so funny. There were so many references to other Mario things, so many jokes, and there's like all these side quests to find these toads because there's this king who's like trying to take over and he is origami, and so he's folding things up into origami shapes and he's folding up toads and hiding them, and so you have to find all these toads, and there's so many side quests that are just super fun, and the humor was just like top notch. Like all the bosses are like office supplies and when it's Paper Mario, that's super funny. So it was one of the most enjoyable games that I've played on the Switch so far, just because like the humor was so good. And then also I played Tunic, and Tunic I think is an indie game that was originally released for PCs, but they did release it on the Switch I think last fall. And I had a friend tell me about it who said, if you like Zelda, you would love Tunic. And it wasn't available on the Switch yet when he told me about it. And then a couple months later, it was. And so Claire and I got Nintendo gift cards for Christmas from my nephew. And so we used those gift cards to buy Tunic. And Tunic is such an interesting game. It does have a big exploration and big puzzle solving components to it, but it's super unique because you're dropped in this world, you have no clue what's going on or anything, and you have to essentially go around and you collect pages of the game manual that tells you how to do certain things. But half of the game manual is not even in English, and it's supposed to replicate how it felt when you were a kid and you started playing games like Zelda or things like that, and you'd read through certain things, but you couldn't read that well yet. And so it was kind of like, wait, what? And that's kind of how it's supposed to be a throwback to that. And it has this adorable fox in it. And the whole time I played it, basically referred to myself as a baby fox. I'm like, I'm just a little baby fox. And it looks so cutesy, but it's so hard. Like the bosses are hard, the puzzles are hard. So it's deceptively adorable and beautifully illustrated. Is illustrated the right word? I don't even know. It's beautiful, but it's really hard. And the music is so good. The music basically sounds like a lo-fi soundtrack. So highly recommend Tunic, but just go into it knowing that it actually is pretty difficult, even though it looks super cutesy. I've been talking for forever and I haven't even gotten to the books yet. So let's dive into my favorite books that I have read in the first quarter. I actually have read a lot of books in the first quarter, mostly thanks to Middle Grade March. So I am going to talk about, I think, my top 5. I'm looking at my list down here and I have 9 books, and I'm not going to talk about all 9 of them because that would just take too long. I think I'm going to go in the order that I finished these books. A lot of these books were actually in March. 3 of them were. But the first one I finished in January, and that's Sword of Kaigen. And I have probably talked about this at length. I loved this book. This book really surprised me. This is a fantasy book, and I knew that it was very like political and also that it was rooted in Asian culture. And those are huge buzzwords for me when it comes to fantasy. And this book is just, it's very, very interesting because you start out at the beginning and you have 2 viewpoints. You have the viewpoint of a young boy, and I think he's in like the 12 to 14 age range. I don't remember exactly how old he is. And then his mother. So those are the 2 viewpoints that we get. The young boy has been going to school, and there's a new boy who has come into the school, and he is from kind of an outside kingdom. And he reveals to this boy that it's not the same in the rest of this kingdom, that where Kaigen is, where they live, is very like old-fashioned. They don't have a lot of technology. The rest of the world isn't like that. The rest of the world has tons of technology, has all kinds of things, and the people who live in Kaigen don't know that. And so why is the government hiding this stuff from Kaigen? Why is Kaigen tucked away and not like this? And so there's this intrigue and this mystery surrounding the beginning of the story. But then we go on to the story, and the story delves really deep into the backstory of the mother and why she's the way that she is, and it tackles some really tough and emotional things. Like it tackles, you know, difficulties in marriage, it tackles grief, it tackles kind of growth as a person and your life not looking the way that you thought it would or that you'd hoped it would, and finding contentment and joy in that and love for people around you. Like there is so much that's so good about this, and yet I did not give it 5 stars. I actually gave it 4 stars because I didn't feel like the ending was completely satisfactory. Not in because like, oh, we left this open for a sequel, but because the way that they resolved some of these unanswered questions was just really not satisfactory to me. It was just kind of like, why is this way? Oh, just because it is, you know, like there wasn't a good explanation for some of the questions that I had as the book went on. Some of the things that I thought were integral parts of the plot were never really answered to my liking, unfortunately. And then there's a whole chapter at the end that kind of didn't really need to be there to the depth that it was. And a lot of people say, oh, well, she was probably leaving it open for a sequel, which maybe she was. But this was written years ago, and she has not written anything else in this world and is not currently planning to. So it felt kind of sloppy in that way for me. I'm pretty sure this was independently published. And so as a result of that, I think that if this had been published under a publisher's umbrella, there probably would have been some editors who would have caught it. But I just feel like the way these characters are written was phenomenal. Like the character work and the world building was higher than 5 stars. So the fact that some of the elements were disappointing for me towards the end didn't make me drop my rating all that much. Like a star or half a star. It was just so good. Sorry, some camera issues here. So if it's a little off, I'm sorry about that. Anyways, the next book that was 5 stars for me, I finished at the end of February, but I actually started in December, and that is Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book, I don't even know what to tell you about this book. I don't know how to describe the plot. I don't even, it's so good. I made a video of it. I'm just gonna link the video because I don't know how to describe the plot of this to you, unlike other Dostoevsky books. I do know how to describe the plot of those, but this, you are left in mystery for so long, for so much of this book, for hundreds of pages in this book. You're kind of like, where are we going with this? And I was riveted reading this. It was phenomenal. I loved it so much. So I will link my review so you can watch that because there's more information about it. There is a spoilery section, but the first section of the video is not spoilery at all, so you can kind of get a feel for what the book is like and how it is different or similar to other Dostoevsky works. And then yeah, just go watch that video if you're curious about it. The last 3 books I want to talk about, I read all in March. I just talked about in my March wrap up how March was kind of a mediocre reading month for me overall, but the books that I read that were good were so good and are in running for like favorites of the year. They were that good. So we'll just go in order that I finished them. So the first one that I finished that I just adored was actually a reread for me, and that's The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. This is, well, it depends who you talk to, what number it is in the Narnia series. It comes after The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Some people put it there. Some people put The Horse and His Boy in between those. Some people put The Magician's Nephew at the beginning before The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and some people put it at the end. So it really depends who you talk to. But I loved The Silver Chair as a kid. This was my favorite in the Narnia series, followed by The Magician's Nephew. It is such a great book. Like, the plotting is so good. The world building is so different than other Narnia books. We're exploring parts of Narnia that we don't see in any of the other books. We're encountering giants. We're encountering like underground and people living underground. And there's so many elements to it. And it's just so good. Our protagonists in this book are Eustace, who is the cousin of the Pevensey siblings, and he is in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So we know him from that book already. And then his schoolmate, Jill Pole. And they end up in Narnia as they're kind of running away from some bullies, and they find out that they were summoned there by Aslan to help rescue this Prince Caspian's son, who has gone missing. And so that's kind of where the book takes them. It has one of my favorite characters in any Narnia book, which is Puddleglum the Marsh Wiggle. If you know, you know. He's phenomenal. So funny, so good. He's the Eeyore of Narnia, I think. And I just love him so very much. But in addition to all the excitement and the adventure and the fantasy, there is some deep, meaningful, beautiful truths in this book that I needed to hear, and I'm sure went right over my head when I was a kid, but as an adult, it was just so deep and so meaningful, and I'm so happy that I reread this book. I haven't been rereading Narnia in general lately. I reread this book specifically for Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. She started a short classics for charity book club, and this was her pick for March. And I'm so happy she chose this. And it was an even richer experience because we had a Zoom call where we got together and we discussed our thoughts on the book. And it was beautiful to hear everyone else's favorite quotes and the parts that were super meaningful to them. And just wonderful. So happy I reread it. My other favorite middle grade from Middle Grade March was The Last Mapmaker by Christina Soon-Tornvat. I don't have it with me, and I might be mispronouncing the name even if I'm getting it right. This is also a middle grade fantasy, also super adventurous. But this one just came out last year and actually is a Newbery honor. I read all of the Newbery nominees, including the winner, and did a reading vlog on that. So I will link that so you can watch it if you're interested. And yeah, it was really good. I really loved it. It's about this young girl named Sai, and she is the daughter of a con man in a society where your lineage is everything. And obviously she doesn't have much of a lineage, and so she actually kind of cons her way into becoming an assistant to a renowned map maker, and then ends up on this journey on this ship because the queen has released this proclamation where anyone can go out and map these unknown lands in the sea, and people who do that and bring the map back will be rewarded either with money or with basically this symbol of lineage, whether or not you even have it. And so because that symbol of lineage is super important to Sai, because there's so much she can't do without it, that is her motivation for going on this trip and assisting the map maker. And they just kind of go from there. It does tackle some really interesting discussions in terms of classism and conservation and colonialism. But out of most of the middle grade books that I read that are newer in Middle Grade March, I felt like the conversation in this was the most nuanced and subtle. And I liked that. It wasn't like hammer kids over the head with this point. I had this idea that I want to talk about this hot button topic, so I'm going to write a book that's super preachy so that way kids know about it. It was more like I have this great story and it just kind of naturally, subtly segged into these other topics. That's how it felt to me. And so I loved it. I loved everything about it. I have zero complaints about it. And also, this is this author's third book that has been nominated for a Newbery. And she's not won any. And I think she's been robbed because her writing in this book was the best out of any of the Newbery nominees. I felt like all the other Newbery nominees were kind of like bare bone prose, which is fine, but her writing is really, really nice. It's really beautiful without feeling flowery at all, and descriptive without feeling heavy-handed in its descriptions. So, highly recommend The Last Mapmaker. And the last book that I want to talk about is one that I just finished and was for sure my favorite book in March. That's Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is my second Robin Hobb book, and it is the second in the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in her Realm of the Elderlings series. And whew, I can't even tell you much about this book because it would be super spoilery for book one, but I read book one, Assassin's Apprentice, in November of last year. It was my favorite book of the year, so I was super excited to finally be able to get to the sequel, Royal Assassin. And in this series, we are following a young boy named Fitz, and he is the bastard son of a prince who is being raised in this castle, but raised like very adjacent to royal life as a whole, just because of how he was conceived. He's not actually a legitimate heir because he is a bastard. And so we're following that. We're following him as the king actually asks him to become an assassin, to be trained as an assassin. And we're following him as he's kind of exploring and discovering multiple different magic systems that are part of this world. And so there's a lot to it, and there's a lot more as we are continuing into book two. But I love how Robin Hobb writes. I love her character development. I love her world building. I love her writing. I love how she does literally everything. Hobb's writing is just like chef's kiss perfection for me. I absolutely love it. Well, okay, that is all of my favorites for the first quarter of 2023. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. What are some things that you have been loving and enjoying for the first few months of 2023? What has been bringing you joy, whether it has been food, whether it has been TV shows or books or music or any category that I didn't mention. I would love to hear what you have been loving in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.